Okay, so we're looking at questions this week. I went through last week the basic conversational structure. I'm not going to ask you to feed it back because it's too cold and early in the morning, but it was setup, question, response, which is basically their answer, and follow-up. And what I was saying last week, hopefully you can remember, but what I was saying last week was the bit that sort of conventional training or all the stuff on YouTube talks about is, oh, all these clever questions. Yeah. Well, you don't need clever questions. And nobody ever talks about the response. It's like we ignore the fact that they've answered. Yeah. Because what, all the sort of old-fashioned and conventional training goes, there's this question, then this question, then this question, then this question. And it completely ignores the fact there's another human being involved in the conversation, which is generally just a bit rude as well as being inefficient. So what we're going to emphasize instead is setup, what comes before the question, and follow-up, which is what comes after their answer. Now, I also did that last week as well, because what you can find is that you get an answer, so you ask them some follow-up questions, which obviously you ask them another question, it takes you back to an answer, to a question, to an answer, to a question, to an answer, and then you move on. Okay? So basically, each time you're changing the topic, or each time you're introducing a whole new question, that becomes a setup. But as you're going through, it should be a pretty much seamless process of just going back and forth as a chat with people. Yeah. And in terms of context for this, well, this applies to anything, basically. Anytime you're talking to another human being, that's the kind of conversational flow to it. But the real detail on this is when you get into a business conversation. It's when you've kind of gone past presenting the candidate, or you've gone past just sort of getting into a conversation with somebody. You've in the context of that sales script, I think most of you guys have seen the cold call script. It's when you've sort of either presented a candidate and it's bounced off, in which case you want to go into a business conversation, or you're just going in to have a business conversation. Yeah? Personally, I almost never do that, by the way. Joe and I were having a chat about, have you guys seen The Wolf of Wall Street? Yeah? Okay. I was saying to Joe, let's ignore all that, but I was saying to Joe, I used to have all the scripts and all the training materials for Stratton Oakmont. In fact, I've still got them somewhere on my OneDrive. I don't know why I was looking for my laptop. I feel like I'm going to bring it up. Used to have all the sales scripts and everything. And the sort of Jordan Belfort approach was always, you sell somebody on something good and reliable and sensible, like you sell them on IBM or Apple or whatever. Okay? And then you start introducing all your new stuff and start making money. Well, if you think about it, what I'm recommending in straight line recruitment is no different. You introduce a really good candidate that's supposed to blow the doors open. You have a conversation with them, and then once you're in a relationship, you can start to introduce other people into different roles or other people at different levels. Yeah. So it's fundamentally not that different. Does that make any sense? So personally, I don't, unless I've already got an established relationship with somebody, I tend not to have a sales call, a cold call, straight into a business conversation, because I've got to work too hard to build my credibility. And I just like life easier than that. So I tend to go in, and I'm recommending that you go in, lead with a candidate, then have the conversation. Yes? Okay. So that's the context for it. And there's a thing called the 3-level business conversation, which is what we did on last week's coaching call, last Thursday's coaching call. If you haven't seen that yet, I would strongly recommend watching it. The training part of that is only about 32 minutes because it's not a heavy concept. It's just 3 levels of conversation. Yeah. But let's get into this a little bit. Setup. The setup is designed to do a few things. It's designed to build agreement and to get somebody on the same wavelength, to build a bit of rapport. And the easiest way of doing that is with a summary. So you summarize back the history of what you've been doing together, or the history of the conversation, or you summarize back what you've talked about, or what you've said, or what they've said. Okay? So a summary is just there. Whoops. Is just there to build some rapport. It's there to build some agreement, because as we talked about a fair bit, the more somebody agrees with you, the easier it is for them to keep agreeing with you. So if you can keep somebody nodding like you guys are, yeah, you're on to a winner. Nod, nod, nod. Good man. Okay. I like you. I don't care what he says. I think you're all right. So the first is a summary. You literally just repeat back. And again, I don't care what you see on YouTube, don't start adding any spin or bullshit about what, trying to make it sound like they agree to something that they haven't, or any of the sort of nasty crap that's still out there. Okay? That's the first part. That's the most sort of straightforward, obvious. I'm just going to emphasize this. You don't have to do all of these. You can do, but you don't have to do them all every time. Okay? Because there's 2 more bits to the setup. The first part is an inoculation. We all went through COVID and we all obviously survived. Inoculations, vaccines, jabs, all that sort of stuff. It's the same basic principle, which is they give you a weak or inert version of the virus so that you build up antibodies, you build up resistance to it. You might get a little bit of the sniffles, or you might get a migraine or whatever, but you don't get the full-blown mumps, measles, polio, whatever it might be, yeah? Now, a psychological inoculation is exactly the same stuff, okay? It's where you know that 99.9 times out of 100, there's a thing that somebody's going to say, yeah? And if you can predict that somebody's going to say it, this is a thing that I don't understand about my fellow sales trainers. If you can predict that an objection's going to happen, why would you plan how to handle it? Why not just prevent it? Yeah? So what we're going to do is kill the dragon when it's young, instead of waiting up and having a fight with it. Wait until it grows up and having a fight with it. So the way we do that is really simple. You give somebody a weak or inert version of the infection. So for example, this is a real life one I did on Friday, telling you about the conversation I had with somebody on Friday. John, I know you've obviously got your own internal TA teams, and I'm absolutely certain you're working with external recruiters as well at the moment. I've no idea how well they're doing or how happy you are with all that, but yeah, just wondering, ... which takes me into a question. Okay, I know you're working. I know you're working with your internal talent acquisition team at the moment, and I'm absolutely certain that you're working with external recruiters. And I don't know how happy you are with how well that's working, or how satisfied you are with the results. And then I can go in and ask a question. Yeah? If I just jump in here and say, what would you look for in using an external recruiter? They'll go, don't need any. We've already got our internal talent acquisition team, and we've got people we're working with. Okay. Now I'm going to telegraph the punch a little bit here, because I was gobsmacked. One of the things I always try and do is I always try and eat my own soup. Okay. So I always try and, if I'm going to get you guys to do something, I will always do it first, and I'll do it bigger and louder. Yeah. So having this conversation with somebody, having a general chat. What comes out at the end of the chat is that, oh yeah, Steve, we're reasonably happy with what's going on, but at any given time we've got 70 open vacancies that aren't getting filled. Now, without that inoculation, I'm not getting anywhere near that conversation. I'm not getting within 100 miles of that conversation without killing the resistance, killing the dragon while it's young. Okay? Now, in a cold call, the obvious objections are going to be, yes, it's a cold call. Who are you? I've never spoken to you before. I wasn't expecting a call. I'm busy. I've got an existing TA team. I've got existing suppliers. I don't need people at the moment. All that stuff, okay? Now, I'm just going to emphasize this one. Never, ever try to knock over all the objections, all the potential objections in one hit, because you will sound like, well, the technical term is knob. You will just sound like an arse if you just keep, I don't know if you've got any vacancies at the moment. I know you weren't expecting the call, and I'm sure you're busy, and you've probably got an internal talent acquisition team, and. It sounds like you're trying to get an outboard started. It's just horrible, yeah? So you pick on the ones that you have to deal with, where you're certain they're going to come up. Not they might. Yeah? Like I am certain that if I catch somebody on a cold call, they will say they're busy. Because they do. Even if they're sat there filing their paper clips, I guarantee that everyone will say they're busy. So that one, I'll always knock over on a cold call. Okay? When I'm getting into a conversation with a hiring manager, I dislike that term, but if I'm getting into a conversation with a hiring manager, I'm pretty sure that they're going to throw back that they've got existing relationships with recruiters, and I've checked out beforehand, they've got an internal TA team. Okay? So I'll knock those over. And if you notice, I didn't make a massive deal out of it. It wasn't, there's this massive issue. It's like, oh, I'm sure you've got your own internal talent acquisition team. You've probably got external suppliers that you're working with. And I don't know how satisfied you are with their job or how well you're dealing with the vacancies that are coming through. Just a statement of fact. It's an acknowledgement, if you like. Nothing more than that. And by the way, if I replay what they already know to be true, like, I don't know if you're working with external recruiters or not. I'm sure you've got your own talent acquisition team at this. That automatically is summary. So simply stating that they've got potential objections builds agreement with them. So it minimizes the objection by just acknowledging it, and it builds agreements with them because they know I'm talking sense, because I'm telling them what they already know. Okay, yeah. And the ideal world is you're listening down the phone, you can hear them going, yeah. The ideal thing here is when they're making agreement noises at you. Yeah. And there's a thing here I'll talk about in a second. But there, what we're trying to do is just acknowledge it. Okay? So all I do is, by the way, there's a word I avoid. I never use the word but. I'm sure you've got your own internal TA team. You're probably working with external recruiters already. But what I'd like to do is, okay? The reason I avoid the word but is that I think of it as an acronym. It stands for behold the underlying truth. What it means is everything that's come before the but is a lie. Oh, I love you, but I think you're amazing, but it's not you, but, yeah? Oh, you winced on that one. It's there, yeah? So instead I'll say, so, all I'd like to do is, or I'll just ignore it completely. I don't know whether you're working with external talent, how happy you are with them. All I like to do is, okay, But I never use a but. I don't use however, which is a middle class but. Yeah. Again, every Monday. Nice. What goes on Sunday night? I don't know what you want to swallowing on a Sunday night. So that's where we're going with it. Then it could be on cocoa or something. I don't know what you're thinking about. So that's the idea behind those. Just state them, state as a fact what you know to be true, and then say, so all I like to do is, or all I want to do is, or all I'd like to ask is, yeah? And then we're into my fun bit. This is where the deep, bendy mind games start. Okay, a focus phrase. A focus phrase is very simply a way of getting somebody to think about the subject before you ask them about the subject. To give you two analogies, it's like if you're going to ask somebody about the contents of a file, ask them to open the cabinet, look at the file, read it, and then you ask them about it. Or if you're going to ask somebody about the chapter of a book, or if you're going to ask somebody about a movie, ask them to watch or read it before you ask them about it. Yeah? But most people don't do that. They just jump in. Yeah? Oh, how happy are you with your recruitment results at the moment? How do you what? What? I'm starting a cup of cup. What? Where'd that come from? So, focus phrase. You're going to want to write these. I'm going to send you a PDF. It'll be late on this afternoon because I've got a big old day. Just scribble these down. It's something simple like thinking about, or focusing on, or looking forward to, or looking back on. Those are the four I use all the time, but I'll send you the PDF and there's, I think, about a dozen in there. Okay? So thinking about, looking forward to, looking back on. Okay? And let me just give you an example. Looking back to the last time, just thinking back to the last time you had a holiday in the sunshine. Yeah. Now, what you're thinking about? Yeah. That's why you're hiccuping. If I just say, just remembering, the time when you had a conversation with somebody and it all went brilliantly. Yeah. That immediately comes into your head. Yeah. Or, just thinking about what you really want to achieve this year, not what you might do or could do, or not what would be nice, but what would you really like to achieve this year? And yet I'm selling it hard with the emphasis as well, because tonality matters. Yeah? And what would you really like to achieve this year? And what are you thinking about as I ask you, what do you really want to achieve this year? Yeah? So now if I ask you, what do you want to achieve this year? I'm more likely to get a decent answer than I am before I use that phrase. Thinking about, looking forward to, looking back on, remembering. Okay? Just looking at this for a second. There's any number of different ways of doing it. But literally, get somebody to think about the subject before you ask them the subject. So what I might do in a three-level business conversation is I'm talking to someone about their business, and I'll say, okay, well, in terms of hitting your goals this year, obviously there's some things that you're trying to achieve, and there's some issues that might hold you back. Yeah. So what do you think the most important issues are to address? Pop. Yeah. Now, there's literally no context to this conversation. We're not talking about anything, but I say something like that, and words and pictures pop into your head. Yeah. If I use it right, feelings can pop into the rest of you. Yeah. And if you notice with that last one, The first couple I've been doing, thinking about, focusing on, looking forward to, looking back on, those are all really short. But in reality, what I do is extend it. So I'll say, just thinking about what you're trying to achieve this year, as a division, as a business, just think about all the elements to it in terms of revenue, profitability, headcount growth, whatever it might be. Yeah, there'll also be some challenges that might potentially hold you back in terms of keep the margins up, or finding the right people to bring in, or whatever it might be. So just think about all that for a second. What do you think is the most important thing for you to focus on this year? That's the question. What's the most important thing to focus on? But that setup, you think about what you're trying to achieve this year: revenue growth, margin, profitability, headcount growth, whatever it might. Yeah. Now, within reason, there's a little rule that I work to, which is long setup, short question, long answer. Short setup, long question, short answer. Yeah? So what I want is to get people to think about the subject in as much detail, in as much scope as I possibly can, and then ask them a really simple question. What's the priorities for this year? Or, what matters most, do you think? Or what are the key issues? Simple, short little questions. But if I set them up properly, I will get really big, comprehensive answers. I can get 2-3 paragraphs, 10 minutes of answer. Yeah. The biggest problem that most recruiters have is on the phone is what technically is called buying airtime. Yeah. Where what you're trying to do is get another minute or another 5 minutes or something on the call. Yeah. You ask the right question with the right setup, and you can get 10 minutes of them talking without you particularly trying. And I'll guarantee, by the way, if you get somebody talking for 10 minutes about stuff that they really care about, that really matters, they ain't going to cut the call short. They're going to want to carry on talking unless they absolutely have to go to a meeting or something. Because once somebody's talking about what matters to them and the challenges they've got, or the goals they're trying to achieve, or what excites them, or what's a pain for them, and they're talking, that's the important thing, they're talking. You're not telling them it, they're talking. They will want to have that, they will want to keep having that conversation. So if I'm doing a cold call leading into a 3-level business conversation, I'll get to the end of 5 minutes and I will legitimately say to somebody, I'm conscious I said I'd only be on for 5 minutes. So, do you want to try and reschedule for another call, or are you happy to carry on? Because if I've got that rolling, I can give them the option of carrying on with the call or setting something else up in the diary, because they're into it. I'm not trying to use a crowbar to get somebody into another conversation. They're into it, they're enjoying it, they're participating. Hell, they're leading it. So getting another date in the diary for another 10-minute chat, not a big ask. That making sense, guys? Yeah? Okay. So, can you over-egg that? Yeah. In reality, almost nobody does. So, I was talking with a candidate last Thursday morning, and it was the usual. We're doing search, semi-search, so it's the usual kind of, oh, well, I'm really happy in my job. Okay, that's great, because 99% of all the people that we work with are happy in their jobs when we start having a conversation. Okay, but then when they start to think about it, if you look at the totality of your job in terms of the kind of clients you thought you were going to be working with, the kind of development you thought you'd have, the salary and income and package you thought you were going to be working with, the management and leadership that you're working with, what you're trying to achieve, and this kind of niggly, aggravating day-to-day stuff that everybody's got. Yeah, I mean, if you think about all that, in an ideal world, what would you want a bit more or less of? And that question, what would you like a bit more or less of? All the rest of it is setup. Starts with inoculation. 99% of everybody we work with is perfectly happy with their current role. Then when they start to look at it, what they find is focus phrase. And all of that, being technical about it, all of that is a big ass summary, because I'm summarizing other people's experience. Now, if I tell you what other people have said, if I tell you what other people have experienced, you can't disagree with it because it's what they've said, it's their experience. You might think, well, it doesn't apply to me, and that's fine. But I'm still building agreement, I'm inoculating against future issues, and I'm getting you to think about the day-to-day niggles, I'm getting you to think about what you're trying to achieve, the support you've had, how well your manager works with you, the kind of leadership you've got, the opportunities you've got for development, all that stuff. What would you like a bit more of or less of? And that typically, that combination of setup and little question, what would you like more or less of, that typically blows the damn doors off. It's not magic bullet, it's not magic trick. If somebody's genuinely really happy where they are and they're paid 30% more than they can get anywhere else, there's no magic trick that's going to get them to go, oh yes, fabulous, I now feel suitably hypnotized, I'll go and join a different company. No. But I can open up a conversation with the vast majority of people and get them talking about stuff. Make sense, guys? Yeah? Okay. I'll tell you now the two hardest things. The two hardest things for people to learn, and for the first time ever, I'm going to set you homework. I'm going to mark it. All right? Probably the last time ever, for that matter. But I'm going to set your homework. I'm going to mark it, and I don't want to know about your dog and its chewing habits. Okay? The hardest things for most people are not inoculating everything under the damn sun. Yeah, just inoculate the really key stuff, and making this big and comprehensive. Almost everybody wants to make this little and tiny and then ask a question with 14 sentences and 63 subclauses and lots of semicolons on the page. And yeah, that should be no more than 10 words, the question. That can be as long as you need it to be. Because what you're trying to do is sink an idea into somebody's head, let them paint their own picture of what's going on and what they want to go on, and then just ask them to describe it. Fundamentally it. Okay? In this context, by the way, that's always an open question. How, what, why, where, when, who. What would you be looking for? What would you like a bit more or less of? What would make a real difference for the business? What would make a real difference for the business? 9 words. Yeah? But you can't ask what would make a real difference for the business unless you've said thinking about beforehand. Because if you just out of the blue say to somebody, what would make a real difference for the business this year? Loads of stuff. Why are you asking? Yeah? Well, how do you mean? What? You just get blanked. Question's the same, but the response is completely different because of all this. Yeah? And just as an aside, I have found in all my research and all my trawling, I have found a grand total of nobody that's talking about this yet. The only people that use any of this are people who studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and even then they use it really wrong in a recruitment or in a sales context. So there's like 50,000 people who've been in the industry that know this because I taught them, but nobody talks about this. I do not know why. People don't even talk about this, the whole structure. They just go, oh, questions, open question, closed question. Open questions, good, closed questions, bad. Oh. It's just not true. This is basic behavioral psychology. Yeah. The difference, by the way, psychology is where you guess what's going on in somebody's head based on how they act. Behavioral psychology, you ignore what's going on in somebody's head and you look at what they do. Okay? So if somebody answers a question better because you've done this, it works. If they don't, it doesn't. Simple as that. Yeah? I'm not going to start spinning you massive bullshit theories about, what happened to your mother that made this particular technique work, or why you think about things in this particular way, or I'm not going to do psychometric tests about all that stuff. All I know is if I use these phrases and I inoculate the key things, do I get a really big, really comprehensive answer? If yes, I'll do more of it. Yeah?
Just going back, still referring to the setup. I know you're having a talent team, absolutely certainly be working with external partners. But I don't know how you're getting on with it, how satisfied you are. So I was just wondering.
Yeah.
The short question being.
How would well, it could be, how would you scale the results you're getting, or how would you evaluate the results that you're getting, or the number and quality of the people that you're getting, or it could be, again, what would you like more or less of?
Okay, so you're not then setting up to cover off all bases when you ask.
No.
Just wondering how we work.
No. Buy somebody a coffee first, Scott. It's
that's probably a point where I had a conversation about the calendar.
Yeah.
It's saying that I don't want to just be transactional, build credibility with you. I work with good people. You've seen the caliber of people I work with.
Yeah.
I know you haven't done a ton of people.
Yeah.
Just wondering how we.
No. Personally, no. What I do, if you've not seen the last week's video, 3-level business conversation is and please excuse my handwriting on this. Okay, but what we do is business. So we talk about their business, and what we're trying to get is what's called drivers and issues. Drivers is what you're trying to achieve. Issue is what's holding you back. It's problems, it's challenges, it's all the euphemisms that go with it. Okay? So a driver is what you're trying to achieve as a business. An issue is what's holding you back from achieving it. Okay. We then drop down to the people stage, and I will stay here. If I have to stay on the business level for 4 phone calls, I'll do that. Because once I've got enough information about that, I can then talk about people, because people are almost always what will deliver the drivers and what will make the issues go away. Not entirely, but almost always. They've certainly got a big part of it. Even if the issue is our CRM system shit and we need to completely redo it, okay, what kind of talent do you need to do that? Because if your existing team could upgrade the entire CRM system, they'd probably have done it. So what do you need, who do you need in order to make that happen? Yeah? And then I'll go from the business, understanding everything about what they're trying to achieve, what problems they're having, and why those matter. And then I'll go to the people level. What kind of people do you need to help deliver your goals? What kind of people will make your challenges go away? And once I've got enough information on that, by enough information, I should be able to write an essay about that for somebody. I should be able to write a 1.5 pages about their business, and I should be able to write a 1.5 pages about the people they require to drive the business forwards. And then, and only then, do I look at how they're currently built to bring talent in. Yeah? what's working, what could work better. Notice that language, by the way. If I'm potentially kicking the competition, I never kick the competition. So I'll say something like, what would make things better for you, and what could be a bit easier or a bit more efficient. Yeah, because that way they'll kick the competition for me. Hurrah! Yeah? If their talent acquisition team is doing a shitty job, and I tell them that their talent acquisition team is doing a shitty job, what will they do? They'll defend them. Yeah. If I push you, what will you do? You push back. Yeah. It's just basics. Yeah. The first thing you learn in judo or jiu-jitsu is when somebody pushes you, pull them, because they'll fall off balance. Yeah. It's just the first thing. So I never criticize somebody's existing systems or process or suppliers or colleagues. I'm very happy to let them do it for me. Yeah. It sounds like a throwaway comment. It's massive. Yeah. Because if you come in and you're trying to say, oh, I can do better than, if you're better, what does that make somebody else? Worse. Yeah. If you're more than, they are by definition less than. Yeah. And if you're talking to somebody who's in charge of this stuff, that implied criticism, they're going to defend themselves. They're going to push back. Of course they are. You would. You might hate your dog, but somebody criticizes it and you'll be all over them. Yeah? You're getting your poo bag and whacking around the head with it. Okay? Make sense? Yeah? So I never, ever criticize what somebody's doing or how they're doing it, but I will always give them the chance to do it in as much exquisite detail as possible. Because there's another thing about human beings. I mentioned last week that I used to be a couples therapist. I've realized I should have explained that better last week. I used to be a couples therapist, yeah? And there's a thing that most couples therapists do, which I don't understand. You get two people in a room and you get them to talk in massive detail with huge amounts of emotion about what they don't like about each other. Well, by the end of the session, how are they feeling about each other, better or worse? Well, worse, because they've just spent an hour talking about what they don't like about each other and how they hate each other, and what, they've put the big jars where the small jars are supposed to go, and they squeeze the toothpaste in the middle and all that shit. Yeah? What you're better doing is getting a couple back to that moment when. Yeah. So what I always used to try and do was to get the guy back to when his bride is walking down the aisle. Okay? The problem is when, and that their music's playing, you turn around and you see your bride walking down the aisle, what are you thinking? And I had one guy that said, oh, fuck no, horror. Oh, shit, okay, this isn't going anywhere. Yeah, you try and get somebody back to the moment where, oh, yeah. And then if you can remember why you had that emotion, you can build on it. But if all you do is go back and repeat and repeat and repeat all the smelly brown stuff about your relationship, it just gets worse. It doesn't get better because you're rehashing and digging in to all the brown stuff. So what I'm trying to do with a prospect or with a candidate is to let them dig themselves further and further into the smelly brown stuff so that I can offer them a ladder or a helping hand. And I can take them out the smelly brown stuff and into the nice green field with the flowers, yeah, and the sunshine. And it doesn't smell bad. Yeah? So to answer your question, Scott, I will hold it back. Yeah, until I really understand this, I'll hold back, and then I'll find out about their people, what kind of people they need, what kind of people make their life better, what kind of people make their issues go away, and then I'll hold back, and then I'll talk about recruitment, and that's how they're currently recruiting. That's the little bit, yeah. That's the nut on the walnut whip, yeah. It's just there largely for decoration, but if you get it wrong, it's horrible and it gets stuck in your teeth. Don't know if that analogy works. I'm not sure it did, but yeah. So I always hold back. Yeah. If my first instinct is to jump in with a pitch, I'll always ask another question.
Do you ever align like to?
Oh, go on.
Are you ever obviously touching on the recruitment side, the business, the people side?
Yeah.
Are you ever trying to just dropping in hints at how you're aligned to?
I try and avoid it. Sometimes it's inevitable, or they balls out ask you a question. Yeah, because sometimes you can't set up the next question without talking about how you do it differently. But I always try to minimize it if I can. I try not to. Yeah, or if I do, I don't sort of, how to put it, I don't sort of throw a little pebble in or put a blade of grass on the pond. I'll get a great big brick and lob it into the middle. Yeah? So I don't kind of subtly hint about stuff because it's annoying. Instead, I'll say, well, you know, the last thing I want to do, Scott, is, oh, you'll love this one, by the way. This is games you can play with people 101. Okay? Well, obviously, Scott, you're having some challenges there, and it's not working out the way you wanted it to. And I don't want to dwell on the fact that you've got all these vacancies open and you're just not finding the right people, but it's still costing you a fortune. I don't really want to focus on that. I'd much rather talk about what kind of people you're trying to bring in. Now, if I say, don't focus on all these unfilled vacancies, don't focus on the fact that you're spending a fortune to not bring in the right people, what are you thinking about? That. Yeah, it's called a negative command. I'll give you a stupid example. Whatever you do, don't think about a green camel. Okay? Don't think about a green camel made out of jelly. Okay? And while you're not imagining a green camel made out of jelly, whatever you do, don't imagine there's a minion on its back. Okay? And while you're not thinking about a green camel made out of jelly with a minion on its back, what's the minion that you're not thinking about doing? Is it dancing? Yeah, there's a few of you going like, no, I'm going to focus on his buttons so I don't think about it. What is it you're not thinking about? Oops, shit, gotcha. Yeah. So I just love that one where you say to me, let's not focus on all the problems you're having and all the money you're spending that isn't giving you the results. Now, let's not dwell on the fact that you've had this role open for 5 months and not had the right person. Yeah, let's think about how we can try and solve it. And that tends to, and to answer your question, Scott, that tends to sit into the recruitment bit. Yeah. So if I'm going to comment on it, that's what I mean. I don't sort of drop a pebble in. I'll get a bloody big brick and lob it right in the middle and watch the waves come out. Yeah. But those negative commands are so much fun. Yeah. Like games you can play with people. Yeah. And so is this. When we know each other a bit better, I'll tell you some really sick and wrong things you can do with this, with focus phrases. I mean, just horribly sick and wrong and hugely fun. I mean, really good fun. There might be beer involved before I tell you that stuff. Yeah. But if you've got somebody's drivers, and if you know their issues, so you know what they're trying to achieve and what's holding them back, you know their pain. Because the gap between this is what I want and this is what I'm getting instead is pain. And pain, for want of a better word, is good when it comes to changing somebody's behavior. If people are comfortable where they are, if people are comfortable with what they're doing and how they're doing it, why would they change? Why would they take a risk of bringing in a new supplier or going out for interviews with another company? It wouldn't make sense. Yeah. So there has to be a gap between what they want and what they're getting. There has to be negative emotions attached to it. Okay. And that is what I'm going to talk about next week. Technical term for that, by the way, is signposting. So to answer sort of not answer it, but build on it, something that you said earlier on. If I'm having a big conversation with somebody and I'm nowhere near talking about the people or how they bring them in, yeah, I will end the call by saying, hey, yeah, appreciate, obviously you've got to jump off the meeting, no problem. Let's get a date in the diary. When's better, next Thursday afternoon or Friday morning? Fantastic. What I'd like to really talk about next time, if it's all right with you, is this. Okay? And I pre-frame or I signpost where the conversation's going to go. Now, will they consciously take that in? Nope. But between this conversation and the next one, it's ticking away in the back of their head. The waves from that rock in the pond, all the wavelets are sort of spinning out into their head. Okay? Doesn't matter how busy you are, doesn't matter how many meetings you've got between those two things, that signpost is going to be impacting, it's going to be in your unconscious, and it's just going to be ticking away. Okay? So the next time we speak, it's easier to get the answers. Particularly if I start the next conversation with a summary of what we talked about. So we talked about this, 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 and this, and as we were finishing up, I said I was hoping to talk about the other. Oh yeah, great. Well, just thinking about that for a second, and then we're into the question. Fabulous. Okay. They answer. They give you whatever answer they give you. Okay? The better this is, and the shorter this is, the more you can predict, not the content, but at least the focus of this. Yeah? At least you can predict that they're going to talk about a particular subject. They're not going to go completely randomly. That's not entirely true. You get some people who genuinely haven't taken in a word you've said, and so you ask a perfectly good question here and they answer a totally different one. I've had that. You must have had that. Yeah, you ask somebody a really sensible question and they go, yeah, and then they talk about something entirely different. How did that come back from? The hell? Well, as a tip, by the way, I just tend to go with it. I just roll forward with that and then I bring them back to the original topic after I've followed up on whatever bullshit they've just come out with. Okay? Because they'll do that for two reasons. They'll do it because they weren't paying attention to what you said, or because what they just gave you is actually more important to them. If they've ignored what you've said here and answered something different, they've just given you a massive clue about their agenda and their priorities. They may as well have put stuff in neon letters. Yeah? Bullshit non sequitur response is normally something what matters, that it's been niggling away in their head, or they've been talking about it in all their internal meetings. Don't ignore it, for God's sake. Yeah? They've given it to you. Take it seriously. Shit, I'm covering a lot of ground today. Sorry about that. Okay, and then we've got the follow-up. Now, the follow-up is, to be honest, the easiest part. It consists of, if I broke it down, it consists of build empathy and rapport, and then probe for more information. Yeah. What you do is you repeat back what they just said. Parrot phrase it back to them. Oh, you said this. You said that. You're mentioning the other. Yeah? And use their words, not a version of their words, not the words they would have used if they were as clever as you, not stuff they should have written in a blog post, but what they said. Okay? And then just repeat it back to them and then ask them a question. Okay? A friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, he said that he could teach me how to be a therapist in 30 seconds. This was a couple of bottles in, I should say, by the way. Big ass South African guy. I'm going to teach therapy in 30 seconds. Okay. So take the last two words that somebody says, turn them into a question, and then look inquisitive. Right. How do you mean? He went, mean? Your mother? Your hamster? Your goldfish? Your dog? It's weird shit, but it does actually work. Yeah? You got that one, yeah?
Yeah, I was saying Becky noises dog when you say something like
Huh?
walk of them.
Yeah. Peeps as well. Yeah. It's a human thing. Yeah, because if I'm on a Zoom or Teams with somebody and they ask me they say something and I want them to talk more about it, I'll just go, and they'll carry on. Yeah. Non-verbal body language is the vast majority of what we send. The reason I said that Teams is better than phone calls and phone calls is better than writing and anything's better than an email, yeah, is simply because of the amount of non-verbal communication you can put out. There's more non-verbal communication in your voice than there is in writing, and there's more face-to-face than there is on a Zoom call. Yeah? And every time the research has been done, about 85% of what we communicate, the meaning we translate, is non-verbal body language rather than words. And after the body language is the tonality that matters. So about 93% of what we send is non-verbal body language and tonality. So yeah, I'll go, your mother? Upward rising terminal to make it into a question, because a statement goes down and a question goes up. You see what I mean? As opposed to, you see what I mean? One is, I'm telling you a fact. The other is, I'm asking you a question. So here, really simple. I just repeat back what they said, and then I ask them a question. And the questions are humongously complicated and profound. It'll be things like, how do you mean? In what way? Could you give me an example? What's your definition? Those are the four I use all the time. In what way? How do you mean? What's your definition? Could you give me an example? And I will use those all the flipping time. Okay? So somebody says, "Oh, you know, we've got to drive efficiencies through the business." Okay, you say driving efficiencies through the business. How do you mean? You say, "Hi, Jess." You say get more productive. You say increase the revenue. How do you mean? Or what's your definition there?
Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay, and that simple thing of repeating back what they said and then, how do you mean? In what way? What's your definition? Okay. Now, this is where the thing I mentioned about tonality matters. Because if you get your tonality wrong, you sound like a dick. You just sound like a moron. Yeah. Because some things are what they are. Oh, you say you're trying to save money. How do you mean? What? Okay. You say you're trying to save money. In what way? In what way? That's just curious. I'm just inquisitive. I'm interested. You're trying to sell them on the fact that you're interested, you're inquisitive, you're curious, you're trying to be helpful, you're trying to understand. You're not trying to sell stuff, you're just trying to understand a bit more. And that's it. That's it for the follow-up. Repeat it back and then just ask a really simple question. How do you mean? In what way? Could you give me an example? What's your definition? Okay. You say you're trying to drive cost efficiencies. Okay. Could you give me an example? And they'll give you an example. Not all the questions work for every situation, but you're smart enough to see the differences. Yeah? And if you're not smart enough, they'll let you know that you were dumb. Trust me on this, been there, done that. Still smarting a little bit. Yeah? But that's basically it. That is what used to take me about 5 hours to talk about. But that's the fundamental stuff. Okay? What you then need to learn is how to use it to create this. Okay? You need to learn how to use the questions to create an emotional response, to get somebody excited about the future and about working with you, to get somebody hacked off about where they are and carrying on that way. Yeah? I'll just signpost the basic rules. Okay, you want somebody hacked off, frustrated and angry about where they are now and what's happening, and you want somebody excited, positive and greedy about making a change and working with you. And the greater the difference between those two, the easier it is to close the deal. Whether it's getting a candidate who isn't looking at the moment, or whether it's bringing in the opportunity to, to own the PSL, whatever it might be. Yeah. The context changes, but the psychology is always the same. What hasn't twigged for you guys? What have you not got at this point? What have I not explained properly? What have I gone too deep on? Give me some questions or thoughts. All good? Go on, man.
Would you say I guess this would apply to a client or something candidates. Would you therefore, let's say you found a business that you really want to work with, are you then using the context and the content from one person to another within that business in order to
as long as I'm very discreet about the way I'm doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's easier to do that context if I'm going down the food chain rather than up it. Yeah, because I can quite easily say, oh, I was talking with Kev the other week and he mentioned that, and I can drop that into conversation. Otherwise, I'll be very anonymous about it. I'll say, oh, people have told me that. Yeah, and I'll take out the sort of doing smileys people and tracking it back, Tinker Tailor thing. Yeah, I'll try and just keep it nice and vague, so that it could be people within the business or it could be people in the industry. But yeah, you can again use the credibility building thing to do that. Yeah. So what a lot of people have been telling me is that just thinking about that for a second in terms of your business, how important is it? So yeah, it ties in completely. You've got to be a little bit discreet about name dropping or giving away the fact that somebody's been talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and industrial secrets and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Any more good? Fabulous. I don't know about you, but I enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
Wait till we get into the good stuff.